there have been a few moments that I've been at the club where I just make the decision on the basis I don't want to die wondering. And I think that was a moment really with Oliver. I just felt, look, this is the moment, and I think this maybe is the guy. Either we try this or we're never going to try it. We're always going to be 10th to 14th team. Is that how I want to leave this place? Is that what I want to be remembered for?
If you've ever wondered what a chairman of a football club does, this series, Running the Game, is for you. It's a series designed to speak to the human beings in the front office of football, in the boardroom, off the field, far away from the glare of the spotlight. They are the human beings that shape the game we love. How do their decisions work? How do they succeed? What do they learn from failure? This is Running the Game. My guest today is a remarkable human being, a gent who stepped in to save the football club he'd loved as a kid in its hour of need, saving it first from bankruptcy, leading the club back into the Premier League, making it a fixture in mid-table, which was meant to be the ceiling. But then last season, a euphoric burst of joy, of one corner flag smashing celebration after another, oversaw the team's first silverware in its 115-year history. That Wembley day out against Manchester City, a 1-0 victory, which honestly, as a neutral looking around the world, the tenacity, the courage, the buccaneering football, you could only look on in admiration, unless you were a Brighton fan. To talk about that season, to talk about the story behind the story, it's a joy to sit here today with the co-owner and the chairman of Crystal Palace. It's Mr. Steve Parish.
Rog, that's some introduction. Thank you.
Steve, I want to start by taking you back to something you said in 2015. You had a quote, it was this. You said, in 10 to 15 years, Crystal Palace will win the Premier League. And that season, you ultimately ended 15th place. We'd only been promoted 2 years prior. I remember you saying it. I remember how much people laughed. They're honestly probably laughing a little bit more nervously today. But when you said that, did you mean it? And if you did, what were you basing it on?
I felt that there was a shift. You could see the way the Premier League was moving. You could see the amount of money the Premier League was generating. And I just felt that a club like us, and indeed Leicester went on to do it, didn't they? You know, a club like us could have a good season, an outperformance season, and perhaps could win the league. And I still think, you know, it can happen. Bournemouth are up there. We're up there. Obviously, it takes an extraordinary set of circumstances. Everything needs to go for you to do it. But it's a fantastic league, and it's getting even more competitive. And I think that's why people enjoy it all over the world.
That 2015-16 season, you actually finished runners-up in the FA Cup. And this year, as I said, you only went and won the bloody thing. More than anything, that day, sight the Palace fans filling Wembley, making memories, starting with that iconic tifo of the late father with his 2 Crystal Palace supporting sons, prophesying Wembley will shake and it will be beautiful, through to the 16th minute Eberechi Eze goal, your trophy list, Palace's first in their 115-year history. What's your most indelible memory of that day when you go back to that place? What do you take from it?
I think the goal and the final whistle, they're the two. The final whistle was extraordinary. Of course, we have a 165-year history in our world because there was a Crystal Palace in the meeting that formed the rules of association football. And that was the original amateur club that was owned by exactly the same people. So we trace our lineage all the way back to there. And the very first FA Cups were played at Crystal Palace. So the story of the FA Cup and Crystal Palace are really interwoven from the very start of the competition. And from when I was a very young kid, you know, this was the only live game on television in the UK. There was no other live game.
Massive.
The whole country coalesced around that game from the moment the players woke up in the morning at the team hotel, travelling on the coach. And in some ways, it was bigger at the time than the Division 1 title. You know, it was almost like the Super Bowl of football. When I was 11, Palace in the 3rd Division got to the semi-final, one of only 5 or 6 clubs. And that's when I felt that there was a context that had something to do with us, that maybe we could do something. And I think it's become a kind of holy grail for Palace fans, this competition, because it's a little bit more winnable than the league title, because it was and is such a big thing to win, you know, the second competition, if you like, even if it's not now the first one, certainly the one that's revered by all the clubs. So, you know, we went through a journey, didn't we? 1990, right and bright, got to the final, came very close. I don't know what it is, 11, 12 minutes, and Man United equalised and then take us to replay when we lose. I was at the replay. When I come to buy the club, Alan and I kind of formed this plan that, we think we can win it. We get to the final 8 minutes away, I think we are from winning, and Man United again equalise. So it's been a lifelong journey, really, and something that at that final whistle that you mentioned, that moment of that exalted joy from all of South London was quite incredible to see. I mean, I knew what it would mean to me, but to see what it meant to the people in the crowd, the outpouring of emotion. And I think, as you say, how well received it was by pretty much everybody else, because it proved, there is a competition. Teams like us can win things. We scored 13 goals, conceded 1 in that whole cup run. We beat 3 teams that were above us in the league. We definitely deserved it. So there was nothing that felt hollow about it at all. And hopefully it's something we can build from. It's a platform we can drive on from.
But let's back up to the beginning of the story. Your story is well known. June 1st, 2010, Palace facing administration bankruptcy. No buyers could be found. You were running a successful advertising company, and you decided on a fateful June day to form a consortium right here, South London boys, fellow fans, to buy Crystal Palace. And you said you quickly learned the hard way how, quote, otherwise brilliant businessmen lose their minds when they get involved in football, just chasing that next win or windfall. You also called ownership a pressure like none other. So tell us, mere mortals, how would you describe the main role of a Premier League club owner? What's the most important thing you do as chairman?
I think you have to create the conditions for success. That's the main thing you do. I mean, obviously, you don't coach the team generally, and you don't kick a football in anger. So, your job is to try and create an environment, try and get the right people involved, and create the conditions where the club can be successful and that can grow. So, and that really is about trying to make a lot more right decisions than wrong ones. And it's trying to put all the building blocks in place, where the club can succeed. And then when you get to that place where, whatever you thought success was, getting promoted to the Premier League, you've then got to build a new platform and try and aim for that, and then and create the conditions where you can get to that. So it's been a long, slow journey. We haven't thrown crazy money at it. The club has really run pretty much off of its own resources, plus obviously the support of great partners that I've had, the original 3 guys, and then obviously now Josh, David and Woody, who've been fantastic. And we try and do it the right way. We try as much as possible for the club to live within its means. We put capital in, when it does need capital, obviously, to grow, to build facilities like this, to develop the stadium, which, will really start in earnest in January. There's a lot of background stuff going on now. So taking a club that has had a checkered past and hasn't, for whatever reason, fulfilled its potential and has fallen quite a long way behind in terms of infrastructure, etc., is a challenge, and you can't do it all overnight. So that's really the job. The job is to get up every day, try and, nudge the ball a little bit further down the pitch.
I mean, we are here, you're quite incredible training ground. Last night, I saw the vision of what the stadium could look like. It has been some learning curve, just that balance between investing in infrastructure or personnel and transfers itself must be a perpetual agony. The search for the right coach, the search for the right talent. What's been the hardest lesson that you've had to learn in this past 15 years, and how did you learn it?
I suppose the hardest lesson is you can't control the outcomes, you can only control the process. And you do have to plan from quite a long way out. A lot of things in normal business you can put to the back burner. You don't necessarily have to do it right now. Whereas, we will start the season on August the 8th. We need a team that are capable, and the games then come thick and fast. And you have to have a kind of crystal ball and try and prepare for it in the best way that you can. And of course, you've got a lot of stakeholders at a football club. You need to keep everybody on side. Everybody talks about our fans, and obviously the displays and all these kind of things are great. But what's more important is that they stick with you, through the tough times. So it's getting all of these kind of constituent parts to point in the right direction all of the time, if you can, through the good and the bad times. And of course, that is a big challenge.
Let's talk about those stakeholders, the different constituent parts. Starting with the players, the talent, and how you recruit it. I mean, Crystal Palace has an incredible legacy of homegrown talent. Famously, Wilfred Zaha grew up so close to Selhurst Park. You can see the floodlights from his childhood bedroom. South London has got one of the greatest catchment areas. Some call it concrete Catalonia, this area. Just a stream of footballers. Nathaniel Klein, Victor Moses, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. How do you explain it? This concentration of talent all across South London. It's a little bit like Palace or like Texas just sitting on an oil field.
Well, I think first of all, it's a cultural melting pot. It's a huge number of nationalities and backgrounds from different parts of the world that have come and settled to make it a kind of uniquely cosmopolitan. And there's obviously just a high density of kids. There's just a lot of young people, 2.8 million people just in South London. And then that doesn't extend to the wider boroughs. So, there's a lot of talent here. Harnessing it and making that jump to the Premier League isn't without its challenges, and it's getting harder. The level of the Premier League is going up, and it's getting more and more difficult as the Premier League brings in more and more global talent. You saw last night at Crystal Palace to have Spanish internationals, Colombian internationals, Japanese internationals. I mean, it's really pinch yourself
American
stuff.
internationals.
American internationals with Chris, of course, very, very important to us. And it's just an incredible thing, but it does mean the challenges are greater for the young players, which is why we've built a world-class facility with world-class coaches, and we're doing everything we can to drive more local kids, because obviously, that's what the fans want to see. So, we're doing everything we can to keep that lineage going and to make sure that there's local representation in the team as much as we can.
You've also recruited incredibly shrewdly. I believe Palace has 29 data-led questions for each recruit. You are heavily involved. Now, let's use someone singular as an example. January 2021, you signed a Frenchman named Jean-Philippe Mateta from Mainz, initially on loan. First 2.5 years, yielded just 8 goals. But since then, he's blossomed into the barreling, potent corner flag assassin that we know and love him as. 43 goals in the last 2.5 years. Even just made his debut for that completely stacked French national team. How did you know that Mateta had this possibility in him? You ended up paying, I think, $17 million for him. And what did Crystal Palace do to unlock his potential?
I mean, I think we are a team where, we're buying rough diamonds, we're buying talent, that there's something there. I mean, he certainly achieved at Mainz, he'd scored good goals, he fought his way up. He is an incredible professional. I mean, he works so hard at his game every day. The positivity that you see on the pitch is him around the training ground every single day. So his positive mental attitude, as much as anything, is what's made him a success. Also, it's a great place to grow. The fans are really forgiving. If you put the effort in, if you put the shift in, but things aren't particularly going your way, you're not going to get a hard time here. The fans are going to stick with you. They're going to give you a lot of love. He gives them a lot of love back. And obviously, we've had great coaches, and with all of those ingredients, he's developed himself into the player that he is. We've obviously some help from the club. So, and a lot of credit has to go to the recruitment department, in finding him and sticking with him. He's had some fallow periods here, some difficult periods here, but that's what we've got to be all about as a club. If we're going to outperform, we can't go and buy the ready-made thing all the time. That's just not where we're going to be. We have to be a place where talent comes and it grows and it develops and it improves, and then we can get these moments in time, perhaps, where you've got a Marc Guehi and an Eberechi Eze and a Jean-Philippe Mateta all in one team at one time. Unfortunately, Michael had a bit of an injury this season. We did have everybody together. But, if we can do that again, who knows what we can achieve.
You talk about rough diamonds. There's another gentleman, 21-year-old. We just had him on the show. I remember he's a visionary midfielder, progressive midfielder. Adam Wharton came from Blackburn for $24 million in January 2024. I mean, he is a singular footballer. He's not the fastest, but his brain works at speeds that other people can't compute. How did you know that he can make the step up from the Championship to the Premier League? 'Cause it is a huge leap.
When we were scouting him, he played one game against Chelsea in the cup competition, and that was a pivotal game for us to watch. So we sent 3 people to watch it. We analysed all the videos. The attribute that he had that was most striking was the desire to go and stand in the traffic and receive the ball. So instead of trying to find space, as maybe you would think that players always want to do, he would almost deliberately go and find the players and stand surrounded by 3 Chelsea players, because his thing is, if you give the ball, this is 3 players I'm going to take out of the picture with the next pass or the next movement. There were lots of other things the scouts looked at, but that was incredibly striking. The other thing in that game was his tenacity. I think there's something in Adam, and there's an interesting thing we've been talking about. He came through the Blackburn Academy. If you play Blackburn, and I don't want to get into kind of northern stereotypes, but you are going to get a tough game, right? I mean, these guys, they come to play, and if you're going to play for Blackburn, you're going to fight and you're going to battle for the ball and you're going to win your headers. And that was on display as well in all the clips that we saw of him. So, look, if we say to you, we absolutely knew that he would be, what he's given to us, of course not. Nobody can predict that. But we certainly thought we had a good chance. Once again, the rest is up to him. You have to have a mentality where you can come and you can perform on the bigger stage. And in the end, as I say, it's the manager and the players that win football matches and win us the cup. And these guys are incredible. And the fact that we were able to spot that and take a kind of opportune moment in January when maybe there weren't too many people that in a position to buy was obviously our good fortune.
Can you test for that? The up to him quality. I don't mean for Adam Wharton per se, but like when you are surveying video, and when you are looking at the data, you said the same as Jean-Philippe Mateta. It was up to him. It was what he did, his mentality. Can you test for that?
I think the really good scouts are looking at a lot of things around the player, how they warm up, maybe how they arrive at the stadium, how they interact with people. There's more of an opportunity to find out more about the person. Again, it's an inexact science, but you've met Adam. He's a singularly unique person. And I think possibly, there are some things that people might have tried to coach out of him. They might have tried to say, oh, you're not running around and you're not doing this, you're not doing that. It's down to him. He decided that this is the way I see the game. This is the way I want to play the game. And he's turned himself into just an incredible footballer, and he's helped us and his teammates to outperform, which is incredible.
And Palace have had a stream of footballers who have just made the faithful's heart soar. And then there's a moment where they do get sold on. This is football. Eberechi Eze to Arsenal for 80 million. Michael Olise, Bayern Munich, 61 million. Aaron Wan-Bissaka to Manchester United, 64 million. We once had Edwin van der Sar on when he was CEO of Ajax. I think they just sold Frankie de Jong to Barcelona, De Ligt to Juventus. And I asked him, I was like, does it make you feel sad that day when these great players leave? And he laughed at me. He's like, no. Essentially, his point was, I do like the piles of cash that come in return. That's what our business is. Do you ache when you lose a player, or is it just football is inevitably a food chain and clubs have to understand their place in it?
I'm not sure about the last part, but I do think that everybody needs a new challenge. It's a short career, isn't it, being a footballer? And people want to achieve different things in different places. And, I agree with Frankie. We need to trade. We do. If we've got a turnover of just under 200 and we're competing with teams that've got a turnover of 600-700, the only way we're going to really be able to achieve anything is to turn the tables and to get really young, value appreciating talent, utilise it at the peak for a while, sell them on, when they're at that peak. And then that defines a pathway for players to want to come to you. This is probably the most positive thing about it for the football club. If you want to bring the very best, brightest talents in to develop, they need to know that, there's a pathway for them onto that. And also on a personal level, Michael and Ebbs, for example, they're two really, really, really outstanding people. Genuinely, they were best mates. They were tied at the hip. If you went to the training ground, you couldn't separate them on any given day. They were competing on everything. Table tennis, chess, everything, every single day.
Wow. Send him on his way.
They were like Morecambe and Wise of football. They were so funny, the pair of them. But they're great guys, and we all wish him at the absolute best. He went at a time of his career where he really should go. He's playing for the league title. He's playing for the Champions League. And that's what we hope to deliver as a club for now. Maybe one day that changes. Maybe one day it's us. Maybe one day we're the destination. But right now we realise we're probably part of the journey for some of these guys. I don't feel anything other than love for him. He scored in the quarterfinal, the semi-final and the final, and extraordinary goals as well, out of nothing when all those games were in the balance. Nobody has given more, Wilfred, him, given more to a football club. So we're really pleased for him.
From players to football management, do you know any managers you've had here? 11.
Okay.
10 gentlemen, Roy Hodgson in there twice, like a footballing Grover Cleveland. He had long tenures, Neil Warnock, Alan Pardew, Sam Allardyce, some who weren't culture fits, famously Frank de Boer, 77 days. Are there common traits of good managers that work here? Or is it like that quote, all happy families are alike, each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way?
All of those people that you mentioned are fantastic people. I've enjoyed working with every single one of them, and they've all brought in good people, and I think that's something that we survive and we thrive on in the difficult moments. We've got a great group at the training ground, great management team, great coaches, and the people at the top of each part of the organisation, if they're not right, that can be very, very problematic long term, because they'll bring in other people that aren't right. The place gets political, perhaps. Everybody's not pointing in the same direction. They're worried more about themselves than they are about the organisation. Football clubs are such important things, and they are quite fragile. And they're important in so many ways to communities and to obviously all the staff here. They transcend, don't they, a business. They're so much bigger. And you really need to keep your ethos, your culture, and try and develop on it and not go backwards. And every one of those guys was a great guy. Every one of those guys brought in great people. Every one of those guys knew more about football than anybody else at the time that was at the club. They all helped us either survive or grow or get to a final. That's the number one recruitment point for us, for anybody in a senior position at the club.
It is the manager.
The manager, you've got to be a great person. We can't all be working against each other at this football club. We don't have the resources to do that. We don't have the money to buy ourselves, out of trouble. So that's the starting point. And then obviously the game is getting more and more technical, more and more data involved, not just in the recruitment, but in the way that we play, the way that the opposition plays, what's required of the individual players and the talent. There's just so much more to it for managers to manage. And so you're looking, first of all, for the character, the person, what's he going to be like in the difficult times. And then, of course, competency and ideas and adaptability, obviously, to situations as well.
So I want to look at this moment and how it began. I mean, there was a time of challenge, 2023, a winless run of 4 games. 2 months later, Roy had to step down after a health scare. Palace were in 15th place. First up, how do you go about finding an ex-manager, Steve? When do you actually start the search? Did you permanently have options on your desk even when things are good? Are you constantly thinking about that next move?
Of course, you're keeping an eye on people. In that situation, Roy had already said to us that he said to me that he wasn't going to carry on at the end of the year. So that was a helpful decision, because it meant that we did start looking. And sometime in November, I sat down with Oliver. I think we had a dinner at my place over 4 hours, and videos of his Frankfurt teams and his other teams. And I mean, just such an impressive conversation. And obviously the things he'd achieved were incredible, from winning in the Nou Camp to winning the Europa League, taking Wolfsburg into the Champions League, such an incredible track record. And there he was with no job.
He hadn't had the job in a year, right?
That was the only negative, it was, you've got all the colours and all the sizes, have you? They're not exactly all the rage, it's kind of that. So the only question mark really for us was, did we have the tools to give him to be successful? And actually that's what led to the signing of Adam Wharton in the January. And the way that Oliver wanted to play, it required a very fast forward passing execution in midfield, and we felt that we needed to improve in that area, and that was one of the big reasons as well that drove us towards a player like Adam and then getting Adam. So in that instance, we can post-rationalise it, and it all sounds, pretty impressive, doesn't it? Of course, it can go wrong, right? But that was the thinking, and so it was.
You did have a number of options. You constantly have like a rolling number of potential candidates. But the Brighton CEO came on here and said the day you start looking for your next manager is the day you hire your new manager. How does it work for you?
You're all in with the manager you've got, obviously, and our ex-Roy saying that he was going, we probably wouldn't have, gone into a process like that. But that's not to say that you're interested in football, right? You're keeping an eye on managers around the world and what they're achieving, and but you're not going to see them and talking to them, obviously, because you've got a coach, and it's an eggshell of football club. You need a very stable situation, and of course, particularly where we stand today, we're 1,000% behind factually the most successful manager and coach we've ever had, and somebody who's absolutely brilliant to work with. But in that instance, because Roy said he was going to go, we were looking.
And what was it? He hadn't been in work for a year. He had thrived at Eintracht Frankfurt. He had led them to a trophy. But you did have other options. What was it about that man in that moment? You're right. Now we look at him, we're like, oh my God, what a genius move. But in that moment, at that dinner, when you left, what was it in you? Was it a gut, Steve, that you left and felt, yeah, this is our man? Or is there something else that helps you with that decision point?
So in the 15 years I've been doing this, I've had countless managers that I've spoken to that have said, I think you can do better than you're doing. I think we can push for more. I think we can win things.
Is that annoying? You're like everyone coming out, or is that inspiring?
Not at all. It's easy to say. I've got to deal in a kind of reality of, okay, this is what we've got to do that with. Do I really believe that we can do that, playing that style with what we've got? Thanks to the recruitment and Dougie and the team and all the work that we've done leading up to that, I felt that we were in a situation where we did have a talent level that was capable of more. And in the end, there have been a few moments that I've been at the club where I just make the decision on the basis I don't want to die wondering. The January when we were in the Championship, money was tight, but we were there or thereabouts. We had a good chance of getting promotion. And that was a moment where I don't want to die wondering, right? Let's try and do some of the things that Ian wants to do. Let's not look back and think that only we did this, we'd probably be in the Premier League. Ripple dissolved forward, we're in the Premier League. We've got 4 points from 11 games. Steve Claridge, I remember, is in the commentary box and he's telling me we're 11-1 on to get relegated and I said, I think we can stay up, and he was kind of, bantering with me, in a positive way. We got to the January and I thought I'd seen enough. I didn't think we were that far away. Do we want to go back to the Championship, spend another 10 years trying to get re-promoted? What do I want to do? What am I going to regret the most? Am I going to regret not trying or trying? So you decide I'm going to regret not trying much more. And I think that was a moment really with Oliver. I just felt, look, if ever we are going to play more on the front foot, if ever we're going to change our playing style, this is the moment. And I think this maybe is the guy that can do it. And his enthusiasm and his love for football and his love for winning, not in a cynical way, but in a really beautiful way. He just loves to win football matches. He loves to work out a way to win football matches. And he doesn't believe in almost any circumstance that you can't win a football match. Leading up to the FA Cup semi-final or quarter-final, semi-final, I don't know where we were, but we went out of the League Cup to Arsenal away. And he was so frustrated. We lost 3-2 because he felt that the players didn't quite believe that they were going to win there that day. And that was, what we had to try and break through. And he will tell you that those moments were some of the most important moments on the journey to winning the FA Cup. In the end, I just thought, this is the moment. Either we try this or we're never going to try it. We're always going to be a low block, 10th to 14th team. That's what we're going to be. Is that how I want to leave this place? Is that what I want to be remembered for?
I mean, it's amazing. I think everyone probably wants on their tombstone, did not die wondering. It's now my life goal. You didn't die wondering. But at the beginning of last season, Palace lost Michael Olise to Bayern. You lost Joachim Andersen to Fulham for 34 million. A lot of analysts worried that you'd struggle without those two quite totemic players. Instead, we know the story. Palace soared. You played stunningly organised football with a ferocious identity, that whip-smart counter. You've led this team for 15 years. This was the most points you earned in the Premier League. You watch every game. In your own words, what went right?
Everything clicked, I think, and it's hard, running it, and it's not going down a coal mine hard, I understand that, but it's challenging, right? And you need people to come and lift you sometimes, right? They need people to come along and when Dougie came in, that was a real moment. He believed in a bit more of the impossible, and we can do this and we can do that. He brought a fresh energy to the club. And
so you're director of football?
He was then, Dougie Friedman. He's gone now, but he was then. And then other people along the way have done that as well, Alan in his time and Sam. But this moment, it was Oliver. Oliver came along and he just created a stronger belief system in everybody. The defining moment for me of the difference that Oliver made, and I'm not talking about to the club over the last year or so, I'm talking about if you go back to when I first started supporting the team. The semi-final, the game's in the balance, Eb scores an amazing goal. We then get a penalty, if you remember. JP, unbelievably reliable from the penalty spot, skims the outside of the post. It's 1-0, we've missed a penalty. Aston Villa are a very good team, a big team. They've got incredible talent. In that moment in my history of Crystal Palace, the fans would have had a big intake of breath everybody would have sunk a little bit. That transmits to the players. In the next 10 minutes, it's a little bit chaotic. Maybe they get one back. Then we're a little bit down again. Maybe they get a second one back. You know, we make a valiant effort at the end, but it's all to no avail. Too often, that's been our story.
Glorious failure.
Yeah,
glorious failure.
Yeah, maybe even a bad refereeing decision in there, so we can feel
fling
properly indignant about it. You know,
justice.
Yeah, and justice, and you know, and this is just not the mentality that the team, the fans, had or have got anymore. Obviously, there's the journey to even get to the platform, but the person that took us through that glass ceiling was Oliver Glasner and the players. And, you know, instead of sinking into our seats, instead of feeling that this was it, this is a bad moment, we then just scored the second, 10 minutes later or whatever, and we go on to win the game 3-0. Before then, away at Doncaster, Ben Chilwell said to me in the dressing room, I think we're going to win this. He said, I was in the Leicester dressing room when we won the league. He said, and I can feel something special in this dressing room. Dean Henderson, who doesn't get enough of a mention, when I signed him, sat on the sofa and said to me, we're 100% winning something if I come to this football club. You know, Oliver was a massive part of it, but there are also some incredible characters in the squad that didn't come to play for 10th to 14th. That may be where we end up this year, but that's not their intention. They're not interested in that. They're interested in trying to do incredible and outstanding things. So in the end, that's what football's all about. It's about the characters you've got at the dressing room, the players on the pitch, and the manager that guides them.
Football is no straight line now. Football does not allow for joy. Success leads to spotlight. Spotlight, as you've already talked about, leads to players leaving. We've talked about Eberechi Eze going to Arsenal. You lose that electric current of a player. Eze went, but your captain, Marc Guehi, ultimately stayed in the last year of his contract. That deal with Liverpool fell apart at the last moment. You did a calculation. His value to Crystal Palace as a player this season greater than the transfer fee you'd miss out on. How would you weigh up questions like that, where to assign value and when to sell and continue to build?
Well, we did quite an analytical look at it, in terms of, what do we think Marc's worth in terms of places in the Premier League? Obviously, what does it do to that mentality, that psyche, that belief system, all those indefinables? And, what's the upside and what's the downside? It was a very marginal call. Marc was great about it as a person. He wasn't, they'd made an offer, it was Liverpool, it was a massive club. He was obviously interested in going, but he was fine about, staying if that was the decision we make. Obviously, it means all the balls in his court tremendously as a player, and he's got the choice of wherever he wants to go. So it was a very difficult one, but I think probably definitely the right one. One of the things that Oliver said, and says a lot about staying humble, right? The reality of this football club is what we need to deal with every day, not the hype or either way, the doom and gloom when things aren't going well and the hype when things are going well. We've got to be here. It's something I learnt very early on in football. Every game's its own story, every season's its own story. You can take absolutely nothing for granted. So we needed to keep Marc because the difference between us having a stellar season and having a relegation threatened season is probably whether you win 5 games or not, right? So the margins in the Premier League are so tight, and you have to remember that, yes, Michael's gone, we're okay. Ebbs is gone, we're okay. Wilfred went, we're okay. But, there's a limit to how much you can keep doing that before you break down the fabric of the team.
How many places is Marc Guehi worth in that calculation?
You see what an incredible player he is. I mean, what an outstanding player he is. And probably, along with Adam, one of our best players actually on the ball, for a defender, a consummate defender. It's significant. We think there's a significant risk, especially when you're losing Ebbs at the same time. If you put that together, we felt that was significant. And then, of course, it's a unique season. First time we're in Europe, right? First time we're in Europe, we're in 4 competitions. The back 3 and not conceding have been so important to us. So you don't want to break that trump for of players. With all those calculations, we decided it wasn't the right time.
We talked about Adam Wharton earlier. Gent is now in the England picture. You said recently Wharton will want to play in the Champions League in his career, and the goal now is to make sure that it's with Crystal Palace, which is beautiful to hear. Is the club to that point, and what has to happen for that next kind of mountain peak to become a reality?
We're seeing already this season that we're an outstanding team in many ways. Are we there yet to get in there? The team certainly believe they are, but we don't know. It's so competitive, this division. Any amount of injuries. We've obviously got a really tough games programme. So it could be this year, it might not be, but that's got to be the aim. The aim for the football club has got to be to aim high. We've got to develop the infrastructure to help us do that, and we've got to try and hold on to the talent that we've got for as long as we can, whilst sensibly trading when we need to. So,
football's hard. We've seen that the Crystal Palace, the bubble, within the last 39 days has kind of risen and dipped. What is the thing that you're most afraid of, Steve? What keeps you up at night?
You can see from that cup final, all of the various Instagrams and the things that we were watching all week, which just means so much to people. And we don't want to let people down. We want to continue to bring that joy to people. So obviously, you can catastrophise and you've got your own fears, but you can't let those things stop you shooting for the stars either, And again, that's something that has happened at the club. We've got to try and manage those both things, the fear of the spectre of relegation and all those terrible things.
Do you still feel that?
Of course, because look at this season. The promoted clubs have started really well. Leeds are a massive club, Sunderland are a massive club, Burnley have got good experience in the division, have stayed in the division before, got into Europe. Look, and who would you say?
You know who I'd say, because I say it to you every time I see you. He's like, no, they won't go down. Everton, but go on.
So they 100% won't go down. We played up there, wonderful new stadium. Club going in the right direction. David is manager, who's an excellent manager. So, of course, we worry about it.
Do you sleep well?
Yeah, not bad.
Do you have Excel spreadsheet-fueled transfer dreams / nightmares?
I try and think positively. I think the good thing to help you sleep, my trick to helping you sleep is you can tell your brain to think about what it wants. It can think about worrying about something, or it can think about winning the FA Cup or winning the Europa Conference League and dreaming about that day. Why not think about that? Just divert your mind to think about something positive.
God, I love that, training yourself to only have happy football dreams. There are massive to-do lists for you. The Selhurst Park renovation. It's amazing standing with you in front of that architect's vision of what it could look like, redeveloping the main stand, which will ultimately add over 8,000 seats. Any American watching this, get yourself to Selhurst Park, and if you can get a ticket, it is my favourite place to watch football outside of Merseyside. It will cost over $260 million. It's been a bear pit of a project. Where are you in the reality, the time frame? And is it possible to build that consistent season-on-season success that you want without that stadium? Are they inextricably tied?
You can outperform only so much, right? There's a correlation between wages, transfer fees, and performance. So it's essential for that. Because of our stadium, we are one of the smaller turnover teams, excluding the media income in the Premier League. And in the end, that will catch up with you unless you fix it. And it's going to catch up with you even more. The new financial rules that are being proposed are much more stringent for clubs our size than PSR was. PSR never really affected us at all. We can operate within PSR very easily. But the financial rules that are being proposed now are extremely tight for clubs like us and Bournemouth and Brentford and those kind of clubs. It's an absolute must for the football club that we extend the size of the stadium. We're in a great catchment area. We've got the fans that want to come. We've got the waiting list. Doing the project, where are we at? There's a lot of things going on. There's a big electrical substation that's in the way. Moving those things isn't easy. That's taken a bit longer than we thought. That's in process. The porta cabins on the side have got to go. We've got to move the dressing rooms that are in there, and they've got to go underneath Homesdale. That's all being built. We've got to run trenches for cables, so that, all sorts of preliminary stuff. In January, there'll be a contract with steel and concrete contractors, and that's really where fans will start to see major construction work going on, and the shell and the core of the stadium start to go up.
It's thrilling. That legacy, and not just a football gentleman who saved his team, brought it silverware, but as a builder. Yeah,
look, I was born 10 minutes away from this training ground. I want this area to have something to be proud of forever. That's what I want. Crystal Palace is a kind of beacon to galvanise South London, this South London and proud moniker that we put on the club. You really saw it at Wembley. You really saw how it can bring people together. And I want something that can do that forever. Playing in the top divisions, playing in Europe, playing in the Premier competitions. That's something that I think everybody can get a huge amount of joy out of. If we can build that, I think it will help cement that in terms of a longevity, and that's what we want to do.
15 years ago, you set the goal of winning the Premier League. We're sitting here after you've just won the FA Cup. You've got that silverware, which I know, talking to you, has changed your identity. What is success for you now?
I think success is for us to build the stand, obviously sell it out, take the club into a different area of kind of psychologically. I remember talking to Ian Wright, and one of the things that he said the team used to say, did you see them coming in the opposition? Wright say, yeah, I saw them get off the coach. And they said, what do they look like, Ray? Look like they came to lose to me. Gareth Southgate said, we had a great team, but when you go to these places and they've got these amazing stadiums, there is an intimidation factor, right? We've got great noise at Selhurst Park, but if there's more people, it will be noisier, it will be more intimidating. So there aren't just the hard benefits to the turnover, there's also the soft benefits. You need to elevate yourself to a position where relegation's really off the table, both financially because of the resources you've got, but just because it's so hard to come and win. Your club is in the division, in my opinion, in a huge part because of Goodison Park. And as a football fan that's trying to compete and win against you, I'm hugely disappointed to say that the new stadium's almost as good. I was really hoping that it would be big and soulless, and you would have somehow lost something. But unfortunately, when you equalised from the penalty spot against us the other day, it was really unbelievable. I mean, look, Selhurst Park is, he's very much like that, but you had 40,000 fans, what Goodison was. We've got 25,000, and it's really, really important. People don't think that it is. Fans sometimes I don't think even understand genuinely how important they are to your success and your performance. And if you can make your home stadium a place that people don't want to go, that you can genuinely intimidate the other side in a positive way, with the noise, with the positivity, it really makes a difference.
I want to ask you two things to close. Number one, if there was one thing that you could have done differently in retrospect, what would that be?
I just want to move quicker. I'm never happy with where we are. I always think that we could be doing better, moving faster. So that's probably the big lesson.
And lastly, Pink Floyd once wrote, "Think I'll buy myself a football team." You went and did it. You brought your boyhood club over a decade and a half into this soaring, heart-lifting, soulful, in your words, story of the last season. What's the most important life lesson that you've learned along the way?
In the end, if you're fortunate enough to do something that you love, that's a great thing, isn't it? It's a cliche, but if you find a job you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life. There are moments where this is really difficult, but the privilege of doing it, the joy that you get out of doing it, the fact that you can be a part of something like the FA Cup final win, it makes for an incredible life, and that would be the life lesson for me, is that you need a purpose in life. You need a direction, you need a purpose, and this gives me so much direction and so much purpose.
And you've also given so many hundreds of thousands of human beings, fans of Palace and non-fans of Palace, to be candid, so much joy, so many memories along the way, which I also want to thank you for. You're an amazing man. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Rod. Always good. Thank you.
Courage.